Welcome to the Been There, Sold That podcast, where you can take away sales and business tips to grow your business efficiently, effectively, and profitably. Take it away, Brianna Henley and Phil Whitebloom.
Hello there, Brianna.
Hey, Phil. How are you today?
I am doing really well. Today, we are going to talk about crisis avoidance.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's a really important topic. And I have a saying, a Philism, and crises are like hurricanes. Nobody should ever be killed in a hurricane because hurricanes, everybody knows they're coming. You have time to prepare. You have time to get out of the way. You have time to leave town, whatever it is, you have time. Yeah, at least a week, maybe more. Crises are very similar. Crises just don't happen. A crisis comes up as a result of lots of things happening for a period of time before it culminates and you surprise somebody with them. So for the recipient of the crisis, it is like all at once, but it didn't have to happen. And let me give you some examples of crises that could have been avoided in business, a little bit in history maybe. So you have the Volkswagen emission scandal, right? There was a giant crisis that took place in 2015 when Volkswagen knew that they installed software that was put in there to intentionally falsify the emission results during emission tests.
Really?
And it caused them huge brand damage. It caused them millions and millions of dollars in fines and everything that goes along with it. That was a negligent and intentional crisis that was created. It didn't just happen. This went on for a long time until they got caught. The Enron accounting scandal in 2001, one of the most famous business scandals of all times. And there was just fraud everywhere. So here's another thing where a crisis was created. Here's a different one in a weather-related one. I've talked about hurricanes. Hurricane Katrina, right? What happened in Hurricane Katrina when New Orleans and Louisiana, just completely flooded out. You couldn't avoid the hurricane, but those levees did not have to fail because for such a long period of time before, everybody knew that the levees were not going to be able to hold a significant weather event like that. And then it finally came. And then we all saw what happened. The Cuban Missile Crisis. And we almost went to nuclear war back in the days of John F. Kennedy in 1962 because of a lack of diplomacy on all sides and communications and everything else. All of these things could have been avoided. And even like we see right here in our own time frame, with not trying to talk politics, just to say that the government shutdowns, right? If the government shuts down and all those bad things happen, I mean, we had a whole year to plan the budget and it's still not done. And we're a half a year beyond the beginning of the government fiscal year. And those things still happen. And they go on year after year. All these kinds of things are crises. And to bring it closer to home. So what happens, I've been part of things where because of bad management decisions that compounded on themselves because some people, even at leadership, their egos get bigger than the reality around them. And they implement all this growth and all this spending and everything else. And the revenue is not there to support all this extra spending, or the profits come down below an acceptable standard for the board of directors and the shareholders if it's a public company. And then you have massive layoffs. And so all these good people who have done nothing wrong lose their jobs. And then for everybody who else is left, you have to clean up the mess and you have to pick up all this work that everybody else did and deal with all the customer and client damage that goes across on it. Maybe bring it even closer is when you're working on a significant sale, a large opportunity, and there's signs out there that the competitors are really gaining ground, or that a customer or a prospect is really unhappy with what's going on. And you know this and you're ignoring it, or people know it and they're not sharing it with you if you're the boss or somebody who could help turn this around because you want to deliver the bad news. And what happens at the end, you lose the sale, and then everybody's surprised because you've been forecasting the sale all the way along, and then all of a sudden it's gone, and you had all this resource plan. People were depending on this to make their budgets and their numbers, and everything else goes with it. Boom. Another crisis. And then we'll kind of turn it back over to you here for a second for your thoughts, and especially before I talk about the warning signs ahead. But here's human resources in business. Mm-hmm. So I've been around long enough to live through the days when sexual harassment finally got recognized in the workplace. And from that point forward, myself, everybody I've worked with, regardless of what level, has been trained heavily on what is right and what is wrong. And when you see sexual harassment or bullying or any kind of harassment in the workplace and you don't address it immediately, it'll build and build and build. It will not go away. It never does. And it will come up. And then the whole place goes into crisis. And what happens? Nobody's focused on the business anymore. They're all focused on damage control. Mm-hmm. They're all focused on the pending lawsuits and job losses and all these other things. And I've witnessed all this stuff happen when if somebody, once it was reported, because you have to know what's happening, but once it was reported, and if you don't take immediate action and do all the things that proper ethics and legal guidelines and just plain morals address, then your whole business is forgotten about because you're dealing with this crisis. And it's if you're a large company or a public company in some way, now you're also in the news and now you have brand damage. So these are all things that I talked about that could have been avoided, right?
Yeah.
You could have done things up front to do this. And by ignoring them, it doesn't mean they're not going to happen. It just means they're going to get worse. And why is this such an important topic? Because we talk about business coaching and we talk about sales coaching and everything that's related to all this stuff, and avoiding a crisis by addressing a problem, no matter how ugly or unpleasant it is the best way to have a successful business, is to go right at it, deal with it, finish it, and move on. And then you won't have that crisis. It'll just be a problem. What do you think?
Oh, I completely agree with you. And sometimes having those conversations comes down to people being uncomfortable and not wanting to either question or be questioned. And that philosophy of being proactive, I've always been a huge believer in solving the problem and solving it in the best possible situation for everyone involved. But if you don't know there's a problem, then you don't know that you need to work on something. So having regular conversations, and we talk about this, or at least I talk about this in my business, having regular conversations with your team, understand what's going on, and not in a way to be micromanagey, because I hear that all the time. Oh, I don't want to be a micromanager. I don't want to be a micromanager. I want people to be engaged and, do their job. Can't they just do their job? Yeah, of course they can. However, problems arise. And they need to know that they can come to whoever's in management or the business owner, say, look, there's an issue here. It might not be a problem now, but there's something going on and I can't put my finger on it. And I'm not quite sure what to do. So let's talk this through and see if we can figure it out. On the government contracting side, we have what's called, when you have a contract, you win a contract. And whether you put people in there or you're providing a deliverable to the government, they have what's called a CPARS, CPARS. And that is the contractor's evaluation of how well they're performing on the contract. There are multiple CPARS scores that they get. It can be everything from exceptional, very good, satisfactory, not performing, and so on. I don't know what the other ones are because I choose not to get those. So one of the things we focus on is actively having that conversation with the contracting officer to say, I want an excellent on the CPAR scores, which means I need to provide you excellent service. So what does that mean, providing you excellent service? That's a very uncomfortable conversation to have, especially if you don't know that person. And not every contracting officer is going to take that conversation well. Some are like, well, you'll just have to wait and see. Others are like, well, I never do anything above a satisfactory, even if you've done a fantastic job. So having those conversations and understanding what your client wants and needs, and as well as providing that opportunity for your employees to come to you when things are getting hard, and have that open door policy, but just having those conversations and understanding a little bit more, which means you actually have to get involved, which means you actually have to have regular conversations with your teams. So there's a book called Fierce Conversations by Susan Scott. And that book, if anybody is having a hard time having conversations, no matter what level that they are, whether you're just a solopreneur, or you've got employees underneath you, or you're in the corporate world, the Fierce Conversations book is a great book to help you start asking the right questions and feeling comfortable and having conversations that might be difficult. But man, once you have those difficult conversations, it's like the whole world opens up. Yeah. And it's this opportunity for possibility and hope. And instead of being depressed and sad and just feeling like the whole world is on your shoulders and the weight of the world is on your shoulders, having those conversations and bringing people along to help you figure out how to move forward is life-changing.
Right.
So, and I don't mean to be dramatic, but it's true.
Well, it's true. And I'd like to jump in here on this.
Sure.
Right what you said, just right there. Having these conversations and helping you to resolve the problem. That's what you were said, right? Did I hear that right?
Solve the problem.
Not having the conversations to find ways to cover it up. Okay? So President Nixon, during Watergate, he did not plan the Watergate break-in. He wasn't even part of the Watergate break-in. He was involved in covering it up. Just think how history would have been different if he would have said, this is wrong, take it to the American people right away, say this happened, and here's going to be the results of everybody who was involved, and turn it over to the Justice Department. His whole presidency would have been different. The whole country would have been different. Everything else, regardless of which side of the aisle you're on, that's not what this is about. This is about handling the conversation as to resolve the problem or to cover up the problem. And guess what happened? Did it stay covered up? No. And it never does. Sometimes it just takes longer than others to get done.
Mm-hmm. You're so correct.
Yeah. So there are warning signs that come with crisis. So you need to be alert and aware of warning signs so you could avert the crises and so you could address certain things. In financial side, which is right in your sweet spot from the overall part, Brianna, it's declining revenues or profits, right? Why are they declining? That doesn't mean 1 month, right? When you're talking with companies, what kind of trend would you say is something to start paying attention to?
Well, when we're doing our strategic planning, we figure out what those critical numbers are and those KPIs or OKRs of what do we need to be paying attention to on a monthly basis. So when we're looking at our P&L, are we looking at our revenues? We're looking at the clients we're bringing in, the cost of goods sold. We're looking at our employee costs. How many people are working overtime? Is it necessary? Do we need to have that? So there's all these different parts and pieces that sound like a lot right now, but when you're rocking and rolling and you're in the rhythm of things, there's certain things that pop up. If it's overages or underages that you're paying attention to, and you start looking at that and start seeing a trend. And then you start paying attention to, well, what are my people doing or not doing? What's going on with the marketplace? What's going on with our customers, our clients? What are their situations? Where do we need to start adjusting or pivoting into different industries, or what do we need to be doing differently? So that's typically where that starts popping up. But kind of to your point to what you said, of when you start noticing things. And sometimes it comes down to there's something in your gut as a manager. When you're talking to a particular person, you're like, something's off. But you know what? We're just going to sit and we're going to wait and see what happens. That's usually not good when you sit and wait. It's typically good to say something as you're noticing things or as you're kind of feeling that intuition. At least that's what I've noticed, because there's always something. Somebody says, oh, I've been meaning to tell you, or I didn't know how to bring this up. Or so trusting your gut as a manager, even as a coach, I learned that lesson the hard way. Trust your gut and ask questions.
Right. I agree. And one of the things you touched on, I just want to point out as a takeaway in this area is, also when you said what's going on with your customers or your clients. So a loss of contracts, key contracts, or a loss of clients or loss of customers is a sign. Mm-hmm. Losing one, you should still find out what was going on. Always. However, if you start losing more than one, let's just say that, that's a sign. Why? Was there a commonality in the reasons? And it could be one of any number of things. And I mean, truly any number of things. And you have to evaluate what that is. And I'm intentionally not jumping into what those things may be, because I don't want to focus on the thing, because it's just one of so many. You need to figure it out, because once that floodgate opens, it's tough to close.
Well, I like that you said that is you actually need to analyze and pay attention. You need to give yourself space and time to actually sit there and look at your numbers, evaluate them from last year. This time last year, how were we doing? Are we up? Are we down? What about last month? What about quarter? How were we from last quarter to this quarter? Let's compare apples to apples, client-wise, right. Apples to apples. Let's make sure that we're taking the time to analyze. Because when you don't take that time, just like when you don't take time to sit down with your team and have conversations with them, you're only paying attention when things are bad because something went wrong. And you don't have to do that. You can take that little bit of time. That's that little bit of discipline of having those conversations once a week, of paying attention to your P&L and paying attention to what's going on, once a week. What does that hurt? Set aside 2 hours and take that time and do it. It's only going to help you, because where your attention goes is where your energy flows. So pay attention to what's going on in your business.
Right. So just to remind everybody where we are in this conversation right now, we're talking about warning signs, things that throw up your red flags and say, oh, let's stop and take a look at this. And in operational issues, you have things that happen. Do you have quality control issues all of a sudden, production delays, employee morale? If you start noticing that your employees are complaining more or taking more sick time or whatever's going on, those are signs. You need to stop and, ask what is happening. Why is it happening? And there could be other things that are going on, technical failures in your systems or cybersecurity issues in modern times now. These are things that if you ignore them, they blow up. And you don't want to do that, especially if, in any of these situations I just said. But just think about how many times have we heard, cybersecurity breaches and the damage that does to the businesses, to the customers, and to the, once again, to the brand reputation. Our people, banks, financial institutions, major corporations, are they being responsible with your information? Right. So that's one. And another area is when the market starts to change, right? So the market conditions are changing. And I've lived through this where, working for a company that was the number one brand in the world for a while, and market conditions were changing and didn't change along with them. And you start losing that position if you don't keep up. So market conditions are another place where there's warning signs, and take a look. Are you where the market is going? Because unless you're able to create the market, there's not too many businesses that could do that. There's some that have revolutionized the market and maybe created new markets, but markets will change. And your new market today is your outdated market tomorrow. So stay in there. So if it's changing, there's a sign. If you need to stop and you need to look at that. Once again, I mentioned brand. It's something happening. Is your brand, is it not the shining star that it was last week, last month, last year? Why is that? Is there something that you have done? Is there something that your competitors have done better? What is it? Because your brand is everything, right?
Yeah.
And then there's leadership. Is your leadership, is there conflicts or dysfunction inside your leadership organization? And a lot of bickering and things like that. And all of a sudden you get personnel drain because people are leaving. These are signs that you just can't dismiss and say, well, tough. If they don't like it, they could go. Well, they did, right? And you don't need to be bleeding your talent.
No.
And then, who would have ever predicted COVID-19? That one impacted everything,
Everyone.
right? And how did that get, that was a crisis that could have been avoided, not at your business level and maybe not stopped it. But, when COVID was first came to light, if there had been better international cooperation and less bickering, maybe it would have been able to be contained better and it wouldn't have been such a horrible, disruptive, deathly kind of thing worldwide. If once it was recognized that it was there and it was spreading quickly, that the world came together, this could have all been different. If that part could have been avoided in your individual business, you couldn't do anything about it. By the time it got there, it was a crisis that somebody else had created that now everybody's the victims from. So watch for the early warning systems, the early warning signs, and address them. And that's what this is to talk about. So what are some of the best ways to address these situations? Quality communications, right? Trust in the people that are bringing you information. You could verify it. You should trust them. You shouldn't argue with people who are bringing you challenging or bad information or bad news information.
Yeah.
But take it as this has the potential to be real and investigate and find out if it is. And if it is, deal with it. Right? Those are the two biggest things you could do, but don't shoot the whistleblower. Right?
Yeah.
So it's a really important thing. And why is this important? Because they have a successful business. You cannot let crises get in the way. And burying the crises is not going to make it go away. It's going to make it many times worse when it gets exposed.
Yeah.
And all the penalties that go along with that. So that's why we're talking to you about this topic today. Because the topic is to be aware, be focused, and take action. If it was a really good thing, you'd be jumping all over it. And you need to jump over the really bad stuff too, or the potentially bad stuff to prevent them from becoming worse stuff, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think that, and I feel like this has gone very negative and very a little bit morbid, but this is real life, and you do need to be paying attention. But it doesn't have to be a bad story. It doesn't have to end like Volkswagen or Enron or COVID. Absolutely not. You can turn it around and have it be actually something that turns into an opportunity of building trust, not only with your team members, but also with your clients. It's an opportunity that can actually turn your business around like you've never believed that it could be turned around. But you have to pay attention to what's going on. And sometimes the simple things are the most important things in your business. Business doesn't have to be complicated. And I feel like there's so many things out there. Everybody likes to talk about how complicated things are, but at the basics, it's about communication. It's about paying attention. It's about really having good conversations and analyzing, hey, what the heck is happening? What happened before? What's happening next? Where do we want to go? And pay attention to those signs that are happening in your business. Again, it doesn't have to be negative. This isn't a negative conversation. It's just pay attention. No. Pay attention to what's going on.
Let me share with you the positive side of when you look at your own business and your own operations, is that if you're not dealing with crises, that means you're probably handling everything very, very well. because the crises have not occurred. See, the thing is, you don't know what crises you've avoided because it just doesn't work that way. If your business is running smoothly with just normal business problems and stuff like that, and you're not dealing with a crisis where everything has to stop and everything's at risk, then congratulations. If you only have to deal with one a year, congratulations, right?
Yeah.
Because you're doing a really good job of avoiding them, because everybody's got situations around them that could go awry, but it's how you handle them that prevents that from happening.
Yeah.
If you're not losing customers, does that mean every one of your customers is happy all the time? Probably not. But when they're not happy, are you taking care of them? Probably yes. And you don't have a customer crisis situations. So take a look at your own place from the other side. Just don't be naive or unaware that if something's coming and you're avoiding it because you don't want to address it, that is thinking that it's just going to go away.
Yeah.
Because it won't. So that's what this is all about. So congratulations to everybody who's not dealing with a crisis or not dealing with a crisis all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who are new at this, things to watch. Don't be afraid. Just be aware.
Yeah. And to your point, Phil, I feel like that's the same in your personal life as it is in your professional life. So just pay attention. Be aware if something's off. If you see something, say something. If something's off.
And
then
if somebody says something to you,
pay attention.
Listen to them.
Yep.
Right. So if you have stories of things that you addressed and you really did a really good job with it and you want to share it with us, you could do that. And how do they do that, Brianna?
Well, they can go to the BeenThereSoldThat.com website, and there's information. Actually, you can email BeenThereSoldThatPodcast@gmail.com, and we're checking out those responses and we're answering those on that website. We're working on it. So if it looks very simple, it's because right now it is. We're working on beefing it up. But you can also reach out to me. Go to bhendley@achievantcoaching.com, and then you can reach out to Phil. Where can they find you, Phil?
The easiest way is just go to the website, to the Contact Us page, and it is at Been There CS, like consulting services, BeenThereCS.com.
Perfect.
And that's the topic for today. So I hope you've got many takeaways that will be helpful in your business.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you guys for listening.
And until then, good selling.
Take care.